Please welcome to the stage the Executive Director of the FinOps Foundation, J.R. Storment.
Good morning. Good morning, and welcome home. We say this every year, and every year we think about changing it, and I see all of you before the show greeting each other, being excited to be at the one place where you can talk about FinOps, your day job, what you do all the time, to anyone in the room. It has been so personally and professionally exciting for me these last 5 years to watch this community develop and to see all of you advance in your careers. So we want to start with you introducing each other, yourselves, to the person next to you. Go ahead and start. Go. Hey, what's your name? John, nice to meet you. Hey. All right, great. Bring it back in, bring it back in. Time is up. That's perfect. You did the first task really well. Wanted to give, got to bring it back in. Almost there, almost there. Perfect, thank you. It always takes a little longer than we expect. So first of all, thank you to our sponsors who have made this event possible. Platinums in particular, Google Cloud, Microsoft, AWS, Oracle Cloud, Cloud Health, Cloudability, and Flexera. We're going to hear more about these people later, but this is all about you connecting, which is why I wanted to start with you saying hi to each other. My name is J.R. Storment, and I think I probably have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to work with all of you in advancing your careers. Myself and my team are all part of the Linux Foundation. So we work for the Global Nonprofit Trade Association, and our mission, our program, there's about 30 full-time staff that work on the FinOps Foundation, is to help all of you advance your careers. First and foremost, that starts with what we just did. Connections, community. That's how this whole thing started 5 years ago. We then grew into education, training, and certification, and then ultimately into best practices and standards, as you're going to hear a lot more about today. Now, last year, I put up these numbers about the size of the community. And remember, this community started with just 26 people back in 2019. And up until last year, it had 48,000 around the world and about 22,000 SMEs and practitioners. This year, the community has grown to over 85,000 participants around the world and over 56,000 SMEs and practitioners. Oh, very exciting. We now represent more than half of global cloud spending. 40 of the Fortune 50 are here on site. 94 of the Fortune 100 interact with the Foundation's programs, 175 corporate members. But we have one mission. That mission is to help all of you advance your careers. Our work is really about the people who do FinOps. And part of the reason my job is so great is we're mission-driven, and as a nonprofit, I get to ask myself and my staff all the time, is this decision in the best interest of our practitioner community? And if it is, we do it, and if it's not, then we don't. So the programs we have built in order to support this community, there's a wide range of them. I'm going to dig into a bunch of them as we go through here, but they help around these areas of community connection, education, best practices, and standards. But let's go back to what started all of this, way back into the pre-cloud days, data center days, when it was all fixed cost, CapEx, and FinOps as a concept was not really emerging. I started my own cloud journey about 2010. Some of you may have started a touch earlier, touch later, but at that time, the entire global cloud market was $500 million. And in fact, I think that was AWS's total revenue at that point, back in 2010. Fast forward about 5 years, we started to see the emergence of programmatic billing feeds and data. AWS Curve files, DBR files, Google exports, these sorts of things starting to come into play, which gave us a lot more data to allocate, to optimize, and to inform the business. Fast forward to about 2017, we started to see dedicated roles emerge. They weren't usually called FinOps at that point, but there were a bunch of people who were being tasked, usually on the side to their day job, to go manage the cost of cloud and to help enable others to do that. By about 2019, realized there was a real need for this and formed the FinOps Foundation with just 26 original practitioners whose job titles were all over the place. At that point, cloud was about $60 billion of annual spend across multiple clouds. Fast forward to 2020, the global pandemic hits, accelerates cloud adoption pretty dramatically, and myself and the early parts of the team joined the Linux Foundation, becoming a part of that entity. At this point, cloud spend grows to about $360 billion. We have a nascent community of about 1,000 people. We start collecting their stories into the first FinOps framework, which you're going to hear more about later today. It's been through many iterations since then. In 2022, we had the first FinOps X. How many people were in Austin at the first FinOps X? All right. So there are about 400 people at that. There's 2,000 at this one. And the pre-con we had yesterday was bigger than the original FinOps X, which is amazing to see. We also launched FinOps for containers materials at that point. And in 2023, we realized data was a real underlying problem. So we formed the Focus project, we're going to hear more about later, to help standardize the language of FinOps. The 0.5 launched just 2 years ago in 2023. Feels like 3 or 4 already. By 2024, we started to see the era of Cloud Plus emerge. We'll hear more about this as well. But a lot of conversations about SaaS management, starting to hear conversations about data center management, a lot more about licensing coming into the process. At this point, cloud is $675 billion. By 2025, the big hot topic was how do we manage our AI spend? That's the explosion of what we've heard this last year. And as a result of all these other things coming in, SaaS, licensing, data center conversations, private cloud, and Gen AI, FinOps now touches up to $2 trillion of global spend across all of these areas. And to represent how that's played out in membership in the foundation, we've seen a big number of these new category of big technology companies joining the FinOps Foundation. We announced last week a big set of new members reflecting this expanded Cloud Plus practice. Hardware providers like NVIDIA and AMD joining, ITAM and software asset management providers like ServiceNow, SaaS and PaaS providers like Snowflake, global clouds like Alibaba, and thousands of more practitioners, people like American Express, who are joining in this Cloud Plus model to help accelerate their practices. So the programs we run really, again, start with the community, but the first codification, if you will, of best practices was the FinOps framework. The FinOps framework launched in 21, as I mentioned, but it started with a definition in 2019. That definition has not had a lot of changes until this year. We made a bit of a change, which was to add the word "and technology," reflecting that FinOps is now being done by people, not just in cloud, but related technology disciplines as well. For the first time this year, we also updated the principles. These were also launched in 2019, and these principles were lightly updated. You'll see the word technology in there a few more times to reflect that expansion, and to clarify that FinOps is generally enabled centrally, much like security is. Distributed accountability, but central enablement of best practices. The 2025 FinOps framework, which launched earlier this year, included some clarifications and modifications to the capabilities and domains, but the big thing that came into play with this was scopes. Scopes are the ability and the reflection of the framework to acknowledge the work of FinOps happening beyond cloud into other areas and different technology segments of spend. We've also added the concept at the top, which we've heard from many of you, that FinOps is driven by executive strategy and technology choices, and those things come together to define how the practice is implemented. That top-level portion is probably the most important. We're calling this FinOps-enabled executive decisions. There might be an acronym in there if you look closely. FinOps-enabled executive decisions start with the idea that the business strategy and tech strategy need to inform the FinOps strategy. That FinOps strategy funnels into a scope which defines which personas, which domains, which capabilities, which phases and maturity of your practice, how you're going to go through that. Yesterday, we had the first, and it feeds data back up to that strategy as well. Yesterday here at FinOps X, we had the first inaugural FinOps Exec Forum. This is the first time we've done this. We brought together VP plus only. So we had VPs, SVPs, EVPs, and CXOs. Sorry, the directors were not invited to this one, to talk about that intersection point, generally teams that were 2 to 3 levels above the FinOps practice. The concept that came out of there was how FinOps is feeding cost and usage data both up and down that stack, informing business strategy at the top levels, where you might have the C-suite defining what new markets we're going to go after and making strategic technology investments. The VPs might be looking at product strategy to figure out how we're going to deliver on those applications. And the other side of that, selecting specific technology services. The directors and managers are looking at speed to market, delivering that with resilience, and they're focused on a lot of the work of FinOps, the operational architectural efficiencies. That then also drives back up. We heard one of the stories in exec yesterday of somebody changing their entire product strategy at the top C-level based on the feedback coming back from the FinOps team. So to hear more about what this looks like in real life, please welcome to the stage one of the execs from yesterday, an SVP of Product and Platform Engineering. Please welcome Emma from Align.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. Wow, it's great to be here and really excited to share our FinOps journey with you. So a little bit about Align Technology. We are the makers of the Invisalign clear aligner system. Along with our network of professionally certified doctors, we've had the privilege of touching the lives and changing the smiles of more than 20 million patients worldwide. Our world of digital starts with our iTero intraoral scanner, and dental labs use our ExoCAD software to design restorations, such as crowns and bridges. The journey with our patient starts when a doctor scans the raw anatomy of a patient using our iTero scanner, and we convert it to a 3D digital data structure. From that point on to when we actually manufacture the physical aligner, all of the experiences that our doctors and patients go through is digital. We can simulate your Invisalign smile for you on the scanner. Doctors can talk to patients about their treatment plan. When the patient's ready to accept the treatment plan, doctors can submit prescriptions, scans, x-rays, photographs, CBCTs, all online. And then we run that through our backbone of machine learning models and algorithms to produce what we call ClinCheck, which is our Invisalign digital treatment plan. Doctors then use our cloud platform. They make changes to the plan. They visualize it, and when they're ready, they accept it. And it is only at that point that digital turns to a physical, unique aligner. We make 1 million unique aligners every day in our manufacturing facility. And this is to say that the entire digital workflow is supported by more than 200 applications and microservices running on multiple cloud solutions. Yesterday I was at the exec session, and it was really fascinating to me to see how all of us use FinOps in enabling our executive decisions in slightly different ways. So at Align Technology, we use FinOps for product strategy, product design, and technology strategy. So let me give you an example. Adding value prop to our doctors is our #1 strategic goal. Not too long ago, we launched diagnostic services on our iTero scanner. Not only can doctors take an iTero scan, but they can also look at oral health findings from our diagnostic services that run on the cloud. And if they want, they can pull up an x-ray of the exact same patient and look at clinical findings on that x-ray. Doctors absolutely love it. But when we were designing this product, we had choices to make that FinOps enabled us for. We get 1.5 million scans from our doctors every month. Do we run each of those scans through our diagnostic services, not knowing if a doctor is interested in oral health findings at that moment? Or do we wait till they click on those scans and on the oral health button to then run it through our backend? These are the choices that we had to go through. Are we going to charge for this capability? Because then the cost model changes completely. Let me give you another example. Driving efficiency in our doctors' clinics is a key goal for us. All of you have been to a dentist, I hope, and you've seen that they use a number of different applications. If we can help streamline the Invisalign journey for a doctor, that is a win for them, and through that, a win for us. So we took a number of these digital workflows and exposed them as APIs that we can then integrate with dental practice management software. We were this close to picking a SaaS provider for our API gateway management, but when we looked at the FinOps costs, and we realized that the network egress costs of our end-to-end workflow, moving from that SaaS cloud provider to the cloud where most of our clinical workflows are housed, the decision was a no-brainer for us. We decided to instead launch the infrastructure in a cloud that was closest to where our clinical workflows are. Yesterday, a common theme at the exec session was driving profitability and margins. That's really important for us, and we do that through waste management, storage infrastructure, as well as global versus regional deployments. So if you think we had this figured out all the time, that is not true. Back in 2019, when we were just migrating our applications to the cloud, things were very chaotic. We didn't really have data, our teams didn't feel accountable, and finance called me all the time to tell me that we were overrunning our budgets. I realized there was nothing we had to do. We had to change the way that we were operating if we wanted to continue to scale in the cloud. That's what we did. We went on a multi-year transformation journey, and looking at the results, I think we did fairly well. So as we look beyond cloud, we want to focus on SaaS. We want to focus on generative AI because adding intelligence and personalization to the Invisalign journey is key for us. If you are interested in deep diving with us, we have a breakout session later on this morning. We'd love to share our experience with you and learn from yours as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma, for sharing your FinOps-enabled executive story. What's so great about this is in that breakout session, Emma's director, who leads FinOps there, is going to deep dive into all those areas, and you'll see how that feeds data up and strategy down as part of it. And their journey from classic FinOps, reactive to proactive, that shift left, and then ultimately into aligning with business strategy. So one of the things that people often ask when they talk about going beyond cloud is, well, does that mean FinOps stops being about cloud? And I want to start at the beginning saying it's cloud plus FinOps. FinOps is rooted in the cloud practice. It's all about variable consumption and taking advantage of that at high velocity. So in your FinOps practice, you're going to continue to have an efficient scope of cloud spending throughout that process that you're going to continuously improve and mature upon as you go. One of the common themes in the state of FinOps that we hear is optimization. We want to optimize our cloud spend as much as possible. So one of the stories you're going to hear in a breakout later today is from a company called Epic Games and optimizing at epic scale. And they truly do have epic scale. They're going to talk about balancing that resilience, that reliability with the scale they have, and also being financially responsible as part of that. And this is a great community story. Back in London, we heard Andre at our April summit last year talking about how they accidentally took down Fortnite and had to put in stronger compliance guidelines on the back of that. The story is going to continue with his colleague, John Williams, digging further into their optimization strategies. You're also going to hear great optimization stories like Coin. How many of you have heard of Coin? It's been around for a few years. So this started, some of the creators are out here, as a quantitative way to measure your cloud efficiency. Salesforce is doing a breakout on this later as well, but this story started 4 years ago with Joe Daly when he was at Nationwide. He's now part of the FinOps Foundation. It was advanced upon in the FinOps Pod in 2022. We had Ursula and Julia talking about that in FinOps 2023, and ultimately now Salesforce is picking it up. A story today with both a director of engineering and a senior director of product coming together to talk about this. Tomorrow, we've got the EVP from Salesforce talking about how that FinOps practice feeds executive level strategy and back down. So FinOps for cloud is at the core of the practice always. We're continuing to advance open source best practices in this area. On FinOps.org now, there are literally thousands of pages of free open source CC by 4 materials you can leverage and lots of certification opportunities for you to get better at your practice. But last year, here at the conference, we started seeing an influx of other types of talks. Talks about managing FinOps in the data center, as Meta showed up doing FinOps applications there. Talks about managing software and licensing by Under Armour. Talks about optimizing SaaS by Priceline. This started to be a theme that we heard here. This was backed up in the state of FinOps data that landed at the beginning of this year, showing that 65% of you, this is back in January, we're already looking at SaaS in your practices, almost 40% private cloud, about a third data center, and a huge spike, we're going to talk about in a bit, in FinOps for AI. So in March, the FinOps Technical Advisory Council put in an addition to the framework, which was scopes. Scopes enable you to select a segment of your technology spend to which you will apply the FinOps practice. That's a simplified view of it here, but it starts with business strategy. What do we need to be doing with this technology in order to accomplish our goals? How does that then set the scope of the practice? What capabilities, what domains, what maturity, thresholds? How does that then get into defining how we're going to go implement it so we can feed the right data back up? So you will have lots of different scopes of your FinOps practice. One of the big banks that was in the conversation yesterday talked about 16 different business units that they have thousands of applications below them. Each of those have a different scope of their FinOps practice in cloud. They then talked about a scope they have for SaaS management. If you're doing data center management using FinOps principles, you might have one there. You might have one for licensing. There's a whole plethora of these out there. The scopes of your FinOps practice are defined by you based on your business strategy and your planning cycles. They're not something the foundation does. So you want to look carefully at designing the scope that fits your needs. So to see what this plethora of scopes looks like in real life, I wanted to welcome to the stage somebody who's been in this community for, I think he actually said this morning he was number 1,000 and something. So out of 85,000, he knew he was way back about 4 or 5 years ago joining, who's going to talk about their experience implementing FinOps scope across lots of different units. Please welcome to the stage Anthony T.J. Johnson from MGM.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good, hopefully. I'm Anthony Johnson. Please call me TJ if you run into me. I am the lead architect for platform economics, and I work at MGM Resorts International. We are a global brand, We're a global brand that looks at gaming and hospitality and entertainment. We have over 30 resorts around the world, and we have such global brands as the Bellagio, Mandalay Bay, the Cosmopolitan, and BetMGM. Now, as JR was saying, we're going to talk about scopes. So our journey in scope started actually about 3 years ago. One of the first things that we did is what we call communication. It's technology expense management. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. That's been around since the 90s, so fairly long time. And we do 4 scopes. We actually do 5. We do AI, but you guys are going to hear a lot about AI from other people. We do public cloud, private cloud, SaaS, and what we call communications. Last year, we started to really focus on SaaS as an objective for us and understanding how that's going to work more long-term and understanding how we can then optimize. One of the things that we looked at is that all these scopes are internally kind of considered different practices, but under the FinOps brand, so to speak, we look at that all together as 2 different objectives or 2 separate objectives. 1, we want to reduce our usage, and 2, we want to reduce our unit cost. And that's the same for everything, right? For public cloud, private cloud, SaaS, those are the 2 objectives that we're all kind of working for. So you can start to see some similarities in kind of what we're doing. Let's take a quick poll. How many of you are at least doing 1 scope? And hint, we're all doing public cloud. Okay, private cloud, keep your hands up if you're doing private cloud. How many of you are doing SaaS? Okay, that's good. AI? Anything custom outside of those so far? Okay, it's good. So what's great is you're not alone, right? Look at people around the room, look at the hands that came up, and you realize that there are a lot of people doing the same thing that you want to do or are already doing it. So for us, it was a function of, I'm not going to be able to grow my team, so I did an extended team or a virtual team where there are other people in the organization that could help me be better at what I'm doing and help me define some of the strategies around these 4 scopes. And so I have people on the networking team that focus on circuits, networking lines, telecom. They focus on mobile, right? And so that's the big thing is you don't have to do it all yourself. Rely on other people to support you in understanding how you can achieve your goals. So when we look at public cloud is focused on at least 4 domains with over 20 different capabilities. What I want to go through today is a little bit of all the different capabilities that we can do across all 4 of those scopes. So what you do is you go from public cloud with the over 20 to private cloud with just a few less, right? They're not exactly the same. Maybe the terminology changes, but just to understand that it's just a very similar process. And then you go to SaaS, and SaaS is, again, another subset of capabilities that you have. And you can continue to go through this whole process and understand better that, yes, they all start to look the same when you look at it from a capability perspective. Just how you implement it is a little bit different. The same thing for communications, right? It's a little bit less again. And then we're going to focus on looking at how we look at, from an MGM perspective, how we look at scopes in the session I have around 10 o'clock. So one of the things that we look at is how do we do measurements? How do we do health checks? Are we doing well in each of these scopes? So the challenge is not necessarily to look at a health check, but what we do is we look at what we call a health score. So we look at actionable measurements and create a scoring process around that that's really going to help us understand that. So we have our 4 scopes, and each of these scopes have different solutions. Some are third party, some are homegrown, right? And then we use focus data. Later this year, we'll be using AI to do more ingestion into our data lake. But from this point, this is what we're trying to do. We're looking at different health scores across all these 7 categories: governance, financial, operational, performance, communication, licensing, and even sustainability. We've been reporting sustainability for 2 years now. So this is an important measurement that you want to try to look at and try to figure out what your scores mean to you, right? This is so important to understand because this is how you are kind of graded in what you do. And when you look at all of these different things, there's some new and emerging kind of practices around a thing called technology optimization, where organizations are asking the FinOps teams, what else can you do? What else can you bring to the table to help us save more money? And this is where we start looking at how we're going to be able to do that. There's 2 things I want to leave you with. The first thing, again, is you're not alone in any of this journey. You have tons of people that can help you here, and then you have people within your own organizations that can help you. The second thing I want to leave you with is when you go into scopes, this allows you to extend your influence within the organization. And that's really good. And you can start creating additional value for the organization as well, and people will see that. All right, thank you.
Thank you, TJ. So TJ's journey is really reflective of what we're seeing across the board. This sort of start with your cloud FinOps, iterate on it, get better at it, start to look at other types of spend like SaaS, start to look at some data center, start to get a more complete view of your application stack. This slide is actually not an example slide. This is actually Disney's slide from their breakout later today and their journey in FinOps, where they're implementing shared FinOps principles across all of these things. And another great community story here. Disney showed up at the first FinOps X in 2022. We had Ali on stage in Austin. Ellie Rausch came back in 2024 talking about their deeper practice, expanding and iterating on the FinOps practice. This year, we've got the director, Amit Patel, sharing a deeper dive into how they're using FinOps across these areas. But critically, what they're doing on this next slide, they're driving the tech roadmap with FinOps data. So when they have a new application that needs to be built or delivered or migrated, the FinOps team is being brought in early to evaluate the needs, the cost, the business metrics, help define essentially the, skipped ahead there, help define the constraints around cost, quality, sustainability data where relevant, and essentially help them figure out if they're going to put into cloud, into SaaS, into data center, and rationalize the roadmap as a part of that. So this is being not only shifted left, but moved further up the stack to product strategy. FinOps for SaaS is a new set of working groups that we've been running for the last 6 months or so. We do these open source working groups that are a combination of practitioners and vendor SMEs who come together in a neutral way to define best practices. There's a whole bunch of new white papers that have landed, 3 new ones that are now on FinOps.org. We're also excited to announce this convergence that's happening. We have formed a partnership with the ITAM Forum to help accelerate the convergence between IT asset management and software asset management that many of you are seeing in your organizations. And we're going to be coming out with a whole new set of FinOps for SaaS and software-related training later next year. So please sign up for that when it's available on learn.finops.org. For those working in data center and looking to apply principles there as well, there has been a working group that is working very diligently. This is hot off the presses. These just landed on the website. 3 new papers that you can go read about how to apply the FinOps principles, how to set context for this in the data center, how to apply your FinOps practice. Lots of great things happening there. And of course, at this conference, you can go check out all these Cloud Plus sessions. There are sessions across SaaS management, licensing, and 3 really great sessions that touch in that data center world by Disney, by Max Mara, and a session by Meta that goes very deep down to rack-level power consumption and how they're layering on top OpEx and CapEx costs to deliver variable consumption-based spend numbers out to business units like Instagram to drive decision-making. It's a fascinating evolution of where I think a lot of this is going to be going over time. So how do we put together all these best practices? So in this big global community, and the community, by the way, is now on 6 continents. We have people here from all over the world who come and do FinOps. We hear stories in the community like we hear here at FinOps X, some of the stories I put up there. We take the State of FinOps data that we run every year, thank you to all of you who participate that, and pull out themes and data from that. We run literally dozens of community calls every month around the world. There's ones in Asia Pacific, there's ones in LATAM, there's ones in Africa, there's ones in Europe, there's ones in the UK. They're happening all the time to deep dive on topics. Working groups form from SMEs who self-select out of those community calls to go deeper and do sprints of 6 to 12 weeks to form best practices. We involve our global ambassador community that is an end user, practitioner-only community to feed into that. And then ultimately our Technical Advisory Council votes and vets the best practice framework updates as they come. This Ambassador Council is amazing. It grew from about 25 people last year to 101 people this year. Practitioner-only end users working in this all over the world on 6 continents. They're feeding back constantly various levels of maturity into the FinOps framework to help us drive improvements. And all of that funnels into our Technical Advisory Council. This is a chartered group of 14 people who are a mix of the top 3 clouds, practitioners, platform providers, and consultants who each year take all those inputs. They met yesterday, in fact. They're talking about the 2026 framework at this conference, so please go find these people. And they codify that into the annual updates. Also very excited to announce that 3 new members were just elected to this. Please welcome Parker, Larry, and Michael, who are newly elected to the TAC. So in this model of FinOps-enabled executive decision, FinOps data not only helps influence technology decisions coming down, but the FinOps teams are often looking at high-growth customer businesses to see how they're scaling, figuring out the margin impacts, ensuring that forecasts are accurate, looking at demand drivers so that they can take that data and send it back up the stack to ensure they're aligned with the right goals. One of the stories shared yesterday in exec was someone actually killing an entire product strategy by finding the data didn't play out in the original plans. This feeding up is a critical underpinning of the FinOps practice, and to hear more about that, we're going to hear from an operations product leader at Nubank. Please welcome to the stage, Thomas Hammer.
Good morning, everyone. Bom dia, pessoal. My name is Thomas. I'm from Nubank, Latin America's largest financial institution, and honestly, we're just thrilled to be here. It's a huge honor for us as a Brazilian company to even be standing on the stage and presenting parts of our journey to you. Usually we don't get this much attention, only when Brazil wins the World Cup or Giselle breaks up with Tom, so this is a big deal for us. Now let's talk Brazil for a second. It's massive, like Amazon River seen from the sky big. And we've got postcard beaches, jungles, more fruits than you can imagine, carnival, animals that look like Pokemon. We got everything. But despite all that beauty, we also have a lot of inequality. Nearly half of our population lives at or below the poverty line, and for decades, that meant being excluded from the financial market. No bank account, no credit history, no access. Because traditional banks simply didn't see any value in low-income communities. And that's where Nubank stepped in. We made it our mission to fight complexity and enable financial conclusion for all parts of society, even if that means starting with a purple credit card, an acai stand, and a dream. And that mission, it worked. In just a few years, we grow to over 120 million customers. That's more than people that live in California, Texas, New York, and Michigan combined. Or as we like to say in Brazil, it's a line longer from São Paulo to the moon and back. But when you grow that fast, your cloud bill does too. We added a bunch of new products and our cloud spend skyrocketed. With great costs comes great responsibility. And when you serve millions of customers who count every real, you just can't afford inefficiencies. Low cost to serve isn't just nice, it's critical. And forecasting our cloud spend became a strategic priority. It feeds product and leadership's decision-making on new products, entering new markets and new strategies. And now let me show you something. Do you see this giant gray area? That's not a parade on day 5 of Carnival. That's how bad we were at forecasting. At one point, we had 75% budget deviation. We weren't forecasting. We were wishful thinking. We sucked. So we had to fix it. And at first, we did what any self-respecting tech company would do. We said, let's build a model. We started with one budget for the entire company, just one, auto regression. Basically like putting all your ingredients for a caipirinha into the blender at the same time and hope it works. It sounds efficient at first, but let me tell you, it doesn't work. Then we split it into 2 parts, microservices and batch processing, and allocated it statically across 8 business units. And it still didn't work. Our forecasts were about as reliable as the start time of a Brazilian barbecue. So next, we got really granular. 45 budgets across all our business units, including horizontals and verticals. So that helped build a FinOps culture. Teams could finally see their spend, they could feel it, they could argue about it in meetings, which in Brazil already means progress. It also exposes the big spenders, but accuracy, still not so great. So we had to change tactics once again. We started using demand driver, real business metrics like customers, transactions, login, security incidents, Kafka messages, things that actually drive cost and that the business already owns and forecasts anyways. So this shifted responsibility. Each BU owned its forecast by multiplying the expected unit cost with this demand driver. No more black box budgeting, no more excuses. It also helped us to separate demand variance, so we had more or less volume than expected, which is usually outside the engineer's control, from unit cost variance, we were more or less efficient, which usually is within their control. But still not enough. Why? Because one demand driver oftentimes just isn't enough. It's like trying to explain Brazilian music just with samba. It's a classic, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. So we had to evolve again. Some BUs were just complex for one variable. There were multiple cost layers, each behaving differently. So we encouraged BUs to, within their one budget, create buckets with own demand drivers. Some BUs created up to 26 buckets, tracking different infrastructure components or products. Yes, it was more effort. Yes, there was some shouting, but in the end, we had over 100 buckets across Nubank, all projected with demand drivers. And guess what? This took us down from 75% deviation to less than 1% in this year. That's a huge win. Leadership trusts us and can, thank you. Yeah, leadership reacted equally. And now they can finally base their decision-making on our forecasts for our cloud cost efficiency ratio. It also helped us to push cost awareness even further left. Now every team within their own BU have their own self-made budget that they live and breathe. So if you're also scaling fast, work in a complex environment, and are tired of treating your cloud cost forecast like a lottery ticket, come to our breakout session later today. We'll dive into how to get granular without going crazy, how to choose demand drivers that you actually have and that actually work, and how to make cloud cost forecasting a strategic tool and not just another headache. So thanks for listening. Again, awesome to be here. And then back to JR.
Thanks, Jared. Really good. Thank you, Thomas. Really great to see that high volume growth can also track with margins and accurate forecasts. So in the State of FinOps 5th iteration, which landed this year, big trend popped out, which is a lot of people were thinking about AI. In fact, we saw one of the biggest jumps in numbers we've ever seen, which was in 2024, only 31% of you were managing AI spend in your practice. This jumped to 63%, and many of you talking about concepts of the cost and runaway cost being a threat to innovation and use of future AI. Now, when we talk about AI, there's two things. A lot of people tend to think I'm talking about the first one, which is AI for FinOps. AI for FinOps is the idea that FinOps can make your AI can make your FinOps practice better. FinOps for AI is the idea that the FinOps practice needs to manage the costs of your AI spending across all the areas it sits. And we hear a lot of people talking about AI almost as a dedicated segment, or one might say scope, treating it as a separate type of line item. Someone yesterday in the exec forum called it an AI P&L that sat across public cloud, it sat across data center, all these different areas for them with a different way that they were managing that technology. So when you're thinking about putting together a scope for AI, you're going to start thinking, of course, about your business constraints. Do I want to be fast? Do I want high quality? Do I want low cost? So let's build together like a little killer AI app scope profile. So for this killer new AI app, I am going to focus on speed and quality over cost. And if we start to break this out into what a scope builder looks like, and there's one of these in the new training that we're about to mention here, you're going to start with an idea that you want to move quickly with your AI. You want to innovate. You're probably not as worried about cost at the business level, and you want to be mindful of the carbon outputs for the high power needs of this application. You're going to look at technology strategy. Again, your C-suite might be doing strategic partnerships or investments that are going to help guide some of this. Some of this will be up to the technology to decide as well. They're going to then go select specific services, might be some colo, might be some SaaS, might be some cloud Gen AI services. From there, you're then going to engage different personas, leadership, engineering, the sustainability team to give inputs, product teams to help drive that strategy. And you're then going to select the capabilities you use. You don't need to do all the FinOps all the time. You just need to do the capabilities that are important for your business strategy at that moment. This will then define both the cadence and pace you go through the FinOps lifecycle, but also help you figure out the maturity level you need, because good enough is probably good enough in certain areas. So today, I'm excited to announce a brand new FinOps certification called, shocker, FinOps for AI. This new certification is reflective of this explosive growth of the AI practice and the idea that you need to build a separate type of profile for that in your FinOps scope. That scope builder I showed is actually from this certification that you can go through and practice on that. Because of the way FinOps and AI are moving, specifically AI is moving so quickly right now, we're building this certification a little bit differently. It's not a one-and-done certification. It is actually split into 4 parts that are going to be continuously updated over the coming months with additional levels. So as AI matures, and tomorrow we're going to hear a lot about the speed of innovation in that space, you get new learning materials, new badges, new levels, culminating in the full certification early next year. This certification joins the constellation or ecosystem of badges that the FinOps Foundation now offers, helping train and educate your teams across the way. Because FinOps is, we like to say in a lot of cases, not really a technology discipline as much as it is a cultural discipline. It's about change and upskilling and collaboration. Some of the exec forum yesterday said, FinOps is the central nervous system in our organization because it's the only team that connects across all these different groups, feeding data around to them. So FinOps is also anchored by data. And a couple years ago, we kept hearing people say, I'm continuously trying to normalize my cloud spend data, or I'm trying to do ETL and ingest all these disparate sources in different ways. So the foundation realized we had an opportunity to help normalize some of the language of FinOps through codifying a specification to do that. We launched the Focus specification at 0.5 2 years ago on this stage. The 1.0 hit last year. Focus is the FinOps open cost and usage specification. And what it does as a spec is define the language of the technology spend so that cloud providers, SaaS providers, You can put your data center costs, your internal costs into this language, come through and are delivered from these billing generators in a common format for you as practitioners, for you as consultants or service providers, for you as tooling vendors, to get more quickly to the outcomes of FinOps, to understand your costs, to quantify value, to manage your practice. So to hear what focus looks like in the field, I wanted to welcome to the stage two people from DeliveryHero. Please welcome Priyanka and Loránt.
Thank you, Jaya. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you. And today, to express how we feel about our data, we brought a meme. So who are we? I don't hear you. Who are we? FinOps practitioners. And what do we want? Focus adoption. When do we want it? Right now. Indeed. Because you heard from TJ and JR great talks about Cloud Plus, how you, the FinOps practitioner, are expanding the scope to SaaS, to data center and beyond. And beginning of this year, actually, I had the chance to contribute to a white paper in our great community with a bunch of good folks from across the globe, and we brought about the white paper called FinOps for SaaS. It actually became so big that we had to split it up to 3 parts, and one of those parts actually is about focus for SaaS. And our company's story really illustrates this evolution well. We are DeliveryHero. We are in the business of fast, local delivery, and we are present in about 70 countries across the globe. We deliver your meals, your groceries, and your coffee fast, easy, and to your door. And throughout this journey, we have grown through acquisitions. And that means you don't get to choose what cloud provider or what SaaS provider your companies you're buying are using. And this ends up, in a mix of different tools and a large variety, and this comes with its own challenges.
So what motivated DeliveryHero to adopt something like Focus? Well, it started when we started listening to our user who wanted to have a real-time visibility into their SaaS consumption, not into just regular cloud costs. And they needed to know when it's happening, not after days or weeks later. That leads us to our second motivation, which is tracking actual versus budget costs. Relying on month-end invoices, it was often too late to make any corrective measures. And with growing number of internal global services, we needed a way to charge back to the teams accurately and fairly. But these challenges come with its own challenges like lack of standardization. So we are dealing data from different providers coming to different data format and data structures, making it very difficult to have a unified view into our FinOps reporting system. That naturally leads to delay in reporting and requires a lot of manual processing in the spreadsheet. And this is what we saw Focus as a perfect solution to overcome the challenges that DeliveryHero is facing today.
Right, and we started the work by taking action. We knew from our engineering teams that they wanted much better visibility for observability. This included both the time dimension as well as more detailed data on our own dimensions like application. And we reached out to our observability provider to discuss, how we can provide this data for our engineers. And they were open to discuss. First discussions were mostly about custom formats and CSV. And we realized actually we need Focus to be able to integrate this data into our systems. And they were open to discuss this too. They were kind of sitting on the fence for a while because they waited for market adoption and validation. And by our ask, and since then they confirmed other customers independently asked for it, they have this validation. So I think now the floor is everybody to go. And since then, we see success because we have seen the first version of our data from the provider. We also took an approach to make this a faster value delivery. And what you see on the slide behind me is the prioritized columns from the Focus specification. We took the specification, we created a one-page summary out of that, and we made sure that only the prioritized columns get into the first iteration.
Yeah, so while working with one of our SaaS providers, we started looking out the possible ways, how can we extend this approach to other providers. And one of the key strategies that we are considering is to make a formal vendor selection criteria or to make even a contractual requirement, especially when you have leverage, when you are onboarding a new tool or you are renewing your existing contract with your provider. Well, this gives a clear message to your provider about the importance of cost transparency and data accessibility in a standardized format like Focus.
Right, and I bet you all want to see your data for content delivery network, for observability, or for your data platform in the Focus format. And this is what our overall vision is. We take all data and put it in one single data set, and this enables us to provide a single pane of glass reporting for our engineers and our leadership so they can track even during the month their actual versus budget, and we can also build on top of this our features, or put our existing features like anomaly management or forecasting. And this wraps up our sneak peek to our breakout in the afternoon. So if you would like to know more, join us at 3 p.m. in breakout C. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great work. Thank you, Loránt and Priyanka. So Focus 1.0 launched last year. It has been iterating quickly by the maintainers, the contributors, and the steerco. Today, I'm excited to announce that last week, the Focus 1.2 specification was ratified and is now available. Woo! I was waiting for the woo. Come on. Thank you. To tell you more about what is in this new version of the specification, please welcome to the stage from the FinOps Foundation, the Working Group Chair and Head of Development, Shawn Alpay.
Hello, everyone. I'm the chair of the Focus Working Group, and we've been hard at work for the last 6 months on the next release of Focus. And I'm thrilled to tell you about what we've added to help you, as FinOps practitioners, better and more comprehensively tell your story of total cost of ownership in the cloud. Over there is the lovely eye chart of Focus columns that I live and breathe every day, broken into functional categories. And these 7 new columns help you address 2 critical use cases: visibility into SaaS and PaaS billing models, and performance of invoice reconciliation and chargeback. As you've heard a lot already during this keynote, the majority of practitioners are now managing SaaS and PaaS, 65% according to the State of FinOps data. And let me tell you something, there's a lot of SaaS providers out there. Public cloud is dominated by a handful of major players, whereas there are tens of thousands of SaaS providers. Maybe before Focus, your organization was willing to ingest public cloud data from, say, 2 public clouds and glue that together. But that's a much tougher pill to swallow for, let's say, a dozen or more SaaS providers. You need a better way. So enter Focus. Through community events and surveys and email and Slack and Carrier Pigeon, we've heard you loud and clear. The biggest value add we could put into Focus would be support for SaaS and PaaS. So the community has spoken. SaaS and PaaS are part of the FinOps practice now, so now they're part of Focus. So what have we done? Well, we've started by adding support for what the industry calls virtual currencies. This is when services are priced not in a national currency like dollars or euros, but in a virtual currency like credits or tokens or Shroot Bucks if you're a fan of The Office. You purchase that virtual currency in dollars or euros or whatever, and then you use it to pay for the services you're consuming, and that's great, but then you have other questions to answer, like, how much of that virtual currency do I have left? When am I gonna run out of it? When do I need to buy more? There's a critical story around the burn down of that virtual currency that needs telling. Stating everything in just national currency will hide that. So that's what these 4 columns are for. They describe your prices and cost as stated in that virtual currency, so you can track that burn down. They have the added benefit of allowing a provider to describe price to build currency exchange, because some providers will price in US dollars and then charge you in your local currency. So that activity can now be shown here. What else? Well, now we've added invoice ID, which of course is critical for performing invoice reconciliation. With this unique ID, you can now tie your granular cost data to your high-level PDF bill that you might receive. And if you find issues, you can then bring those examples to your provider for resolution. We've also added columns that tell you which account structures are involved, not the IDs of the accounts, we already have those, but what types of accounts. Is it a payer account, a subscription, a project, a tenancy? Across providers, or even within providers, that might not be the same from one row to the next. And these new columns help eliminate any possible confusion, which of course is critical for performing your invoice reconciliation, your chargeback and your showback. There's so much more that I can't cover here. You have to look at the changelog for all the details, but we feel confident that these additions will help unlock more providers generating more and higher value focused data sets, which then allow you as practitioners to better tell your FinOps data story. What's next? So we're on a twice-a-year release schedule, and we're already targeting the end of the year for 1.3, and I'm so thrilled to be part of this ride. The Focus Working Group is a big tent, a lot of providers and practitioners and vendors sharing a lot of different ideas. Consensus is hard, but I think I can speak for the entire working group when I say that we're super proud of what we're doing here, and we're looking forward to bringing the next release forward. Special thanks to all of our contributors, our maintainers, and our steering committee. Both now and in the future, we're looking forward to what happens next. So thank you very much. More to come.
Hey. Nice work. Congrats on all the progress, and yes, big thank you to everybody who's contributed to this. In the last year, we've already seen all of these major cloud providers provide various levels of focused support, and hopefully continue to hear more iterations on that. Excited today to announce a new set of providers now providing focused support. We've now added Alibaba Cloud, Databricks, and Grafana, representing SaaS, PaaS, and global clouds. So all of these vendors, all of them are in attendance here, so please go find them, talk to them, and give them feedback on their implementations and what you want to see in future versions. Now, we're going to leave you some action items. This should help you, it should help Focus, it helps us. Go turn on the Focus data sets at your respective providers. And, as Priyanka and Loránt were saying, encourage your SaaS providers to support Focus. Go get trained. There's free training, there's a certification. Get to know the language of Focus, which you can start using in your business now. And what else, Shawn?
Please come to the Focus booth. It's just downstairs and over there. We want to share with you the full details of 1.2, talk to you about what you want to see in 1.3. We have a survey to take, so we want to hear from you. Come say hi to me and the maintainers down there.
This is a global community effort, so you can use it, you can contribute to it, you can work toward being a maintainer. Come get involved in Focus and be a part of defining the future of FinOps. Thank you so much, Shawn.
All right.
One of the cool things we get to do every year is bring together the top cloud providers in the world and leadership there to talk about how all of these themes are impacting both their internal product engineering practices as well as their customers. This is a new one for us this year, which is that we actually have the top four global cloud providers from North America here, represented with their leadership to talk about this. Very excited that we will have a conversation led by one of our new governing board members from American Express, as well as folks who lead product engineering efforts at these clouds to talk about these themes. You can see there are so many people in this panel, it's taking us a while to load the chairs. That's how dense and packed it's going to be. So please welcome to the stage Keena Blunchi from American Express, along with James, Scott, Praveer, and Manan for the Cloud VP panel.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I shared the stage last year with Noreen Dever at American Express, and I remember wondering out loud, if only there were some cloud service providers that I can have a conversation with. And today, I am thrilled to be moderating today's conversation with 4 outstanding leaders from cloud service providers, and they're going to share their perspectives on how they're supporting their customers and how they're directing their own teams. So we're going to start with a quick round of intros. Keena Blunchi, American Express. I lead the infrastructure, data, and analytics team within technology that unifies FinOps, full stack cost transparency, data science, and business intelligence to enable and mature our platform economics practice. James.
Very nice to be here. My name is James Greenfield. I lead commerce platform at AWS, which includes our billing, cost management, payments, fraud, and I've been with AWS for 20 years, believe it or not.
Hi, I'm Scott Hunter. I work at Microsoft on Azure. My team primarily builds the Azure developer experience. We build some of the PaaS platform services in Azure, the developer tools for all the IDEs, and the SDKs for Azure.
And welcome. I'm glad to be here like James. Both of us are here last year as well. So I'm Praveer Gupta, VP and GM of the Google Cloud Business Platform. Think of that as the CIO role for Google Cloud. I've been at Google for 18, 19 years, and my current role currently includes all the ERP systems, CRM systems, your ordering, billing, data warehousing, and obviously FinOps for Google Cloud.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Fantastic event. I'm excited to be here, learn from all of you. I've been at Oracle for 5.5 years. I manage the commercial services platform at Oracle, which includes like a bunch of services, including metering, costing, billing, and all of the FinOps tools that our internal and external customers use.
Awesome. All right. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with you, Manan. So we're starting with the concept of FinOps-enabled executive decisions, and FinOps is everyone's job. So as we're balancing these two concepts, the increasing emphasis is on aligning top-level business priorities while simultaneously enabling engineers to be cost-aware and shifting costs left into the product design and development cycles. So as a product leader, how are you directing your own teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the message that we consistently share with our organization is that there are certain attributes, certain aspects of our services that are non-negotiable. Security, availability, performance, customer experience, and developer productivity. So with those things in mind, with those things in context, then we optimize cost. And then cost optimization is not an afterthought. It's something that we bake from day one. It's part of our strategy in terms of what we build. It's part of our architecture decisions, our design, our technology choices, in terms of how we build. And then once these systems are in place, when our services, our products are in production, then we have metrics. We have business metrics. We have operational metrics. Basically feedback into our developers and into leadership. So if some resources are underutilized, our developers are able to see them like naturally. And if some capabilities have niche adoption, then we are able to see them directly and adapt, regularly. So with this feed forward and this feedback loop, we are able to create this virtuous cycle of innovation that is sustainable.
Yeah, and so, what we're seeing as practitioners is that engineers take pride in making the right decision. So when informed by, the correct strategic context, the sky is literally the limit. And so,
Absolutely.
right? And then when, as you said, when FinOps data is feeding back to informing executive strategy, it is that virtuous cycle that we all aspire to. So let's continue on optimizing for value, because that's one of the topics that you touched on, and making decisions based not only on minimizing costs, but also maximizing the business impact per dollar spent. And I'm going to go to you, Scott, from a developer perspective, right? So as engineer, we might get a little bit spicy here, but as engineering and development teams become more cost aware, would love to know how you're helping them interpret the available data to make decisions in terms of tech stack, features, capabilities, perhaps maybe where automation plays a part. All of those perspectives are really valuable for us.
Sorry. When we talk about FinOps, I hear people talk about optimizing services and optimizing that, and I really want to focus on the developer aspect, as you said. There's a lot of developer things that we don't really talk about a lot of times, and it breaks down to three kinds of things that I really look at. One of the things is I talk to a lot of customers, and we find these customers want to modernize, and part of modernization typically is, we hear numbers like 8 months to modernize an application. And so how can we enable developers to more quickly modernize applications? And so we are looking at all kinds of things in the agentic world of saying, how do you move from a version of Java to the next version of Java, or a version of .NET to the next version of .NET agentically? So you can do that very quickly. That's a huge optimization. We also look at how do you re-platform from something to something else. And so you're going to see a whole bunch of agentic tools from us. We're using these internally for ourselves to keep our stacks up to date, and we want to make those available to our customers as well. The next thing I think about is, as developers, we have all these developers working on this code, and I want to go help them as well. And so you've probably seen a lot of announcements the last couple of weeks from OpenAI and Microsoft and other companies about having agentic coding agents that can actually go and work on your bug backlogs for you in an agentic way. We're using those at Microsoft. I know some of my friends here are doing the same thing in their companies as well. And then finally, the next thing is most of us have site reliability engineers. These are people that keep our apps running and stuff like that. And we're looking at new ways. Today when an issue happens on a site, what probably happens is somebody wakes up, they go and actually go to a portal. They might go look and see the app's really down. They'll then go and get a memory dump or whatever, crash dump or whatever. That's a lot of work. Once again, with some agentic agents, we can actually go take those types of experiences, have the AI do that work for us, bring me the results. And so as a developer, when I start, I'm already running on the ground. And so I think these are all different ways of thinking of optimizations in a FinOps world than just thinking of how do you manage your services.
But what about the trust gap? I mean, how do we trust that the automation and the agents are going to, do the right thing?
Exactly. We want to make sure a human's always involved. So literally, this is about removing some of the developer toil. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a developer that's going to approve any code change. The developer's going to approve anything that's going to happen to your live sites and stuff like that. Nothing is going to happen automatically. There's always a human in the loop.
Got it. Okay. All right. Fantastic. So, what we're also seeing is that, thanks to the hard work of this global community of practitioners, the engineers, the developers, the builders, the delivery teams, they care a lot about cost still, right? And so their questions are now evolving from what is the cheapest option to, what delivers the most value for the business goal that we're trying to achieve. All right, so I want to talk about generative AI with Praveer, but in the context of managing and allocating its cost and measuring its value. So what we're seeing is that FinOps for Gen AI workloads requires a bit of a more nuanced approach due to the unique cost structures, the scaling behaviors, and the value model. So I think that we have kind of a shared experience around the speed of change in this space. So I would love to hear how your customers are responding, and more importantly, how you're supporting the speed of change. And maybe there's some internal examples that we can learn from, because this is a shared experience.
Sure. When we talk about Gen AI, what I would say is we see customers use and leverage Gen AI in two primary ways. First is applying Gen AI into their products, and this is to improve the products that they are selling to their customers, to improve the top line. The second is to apply it internally to transform their business processes, to drive operational efficiency, even developer productivity, ultimately to improve their bottom line, right? Now, irrespective of those improvements, whether they are for the top line or for the bottom line, what is important is to understand what are the unit economics so that you can truly understand the value of that technology investment. Since you asked about some examples, let me share a few examples that we are seeing, both from customers as well as internally for us as well. In terms of customers, we have customers like Verizon, who have leveraged Google Cloud's Gemini and the customer engagement suite to build out a customer service agent across their network of call centers and stores. Building that out, they have seen a 40% increase in sales since their AI deployment, right? Let me give another example of what is within Google Cloud in terms of how we have been driving operational efficiency for improvements of our bottom line, right? If you take an area of marketing campaign content generation, that traditionally has considerable costs, takes multiple weeks. With a one-click campaign deployment that is personalized, it's highly relevant, you can create those campaigns with that one click and reduce that time that used to take multiple weeks to a matter of minutes. We have seen a 40% reduction in actual cost of running the campaign and like a 1 week reduction in starting new campaign. So huge operational gains that we see in all these areas, right? And it's not just like marketing campaign generation, we also see it in how we run support. This is how Google Cloud is providing support to the end customers. We have been able to leverage kind of Gen AI into the customer service self-help in terms of how we provide those personal answers to the end customers based on the customer account and the knowledge base. Again, as we talk about operational efficiency here, we have seen a 40% reduction in the time resolution to provide those answers to the end customers for the questions they are asking. So how do these examples now connect to FinOps, right? So when customers are trying to innovate and apply new technologies, in this case, Gen AI, they are looking at across the board of, can I apply Gen AI for this solution, this problem, right? They are exploring in that phase. What we need to make sure is we are providing the cost visibility, fully loaded costs that come with the lowest latency and provide the right guardrails to the end customers. Those guardrails need to be providing alerts, anomaly detection, budgets, all of these things there, right? When you talk about cost granularity, making sure that the input token cost and the output token cost is available for the customers. When you talk about fully loaded cost being available as early as possible, over the years, we have been making lots of hard strides in this area to make sure 99% of all your costs arrive within 23 hours, right? And there's an area that is slightly different about Gen AI than I'll call traditional VMs, which is there's an exploratory phase and there's a production phase, right? In the exploratory phase, customers are looking at using the best model out there to the problem they are trying to solve, because they want to assess and see, will the model solve that problem? But as they move from that exploratory phase to the production phase, then they start to care about, will I have capacity? Will those models and those services adhere to the SLOs? So we have been thinking about and providing something called provisioned throughput, which can guarantee capacity as well as SLOs. So those are some of the nuances that you have to take into account as you think about Gen AI.
Fantastic. And
I want to riff on something you said at the end there a little bit as well. One of the other interesting differences that we've seen around Gen AI is, historically you think about, when you think about FinOps and cost, we think about, you fix value and then you minimize cost. You know what the outcome is that you want. You want to hit a performance SLA, or you want some working functionality, and then you try to figure out how to deliver that at the lowest cost possible. What's interesting with Gen AI, and training is an easy sort of example to think about this, is more and more often it may make sense to fix cost and maximize value. And so you can hand waving a little bit, you can train a model kind of indefinitely and get increasingly better results. And so what you may do there is you may decide, I'm going to spend a certain amount of dollars training this, and then I want to get sort of as much out of that as possible. And so it's less about spending less, it's more about fix the cost and then try to maximize the value. I think we'll see some of the things emerging around agents. A big part of what makes agents very powerful is you get this feedback loop. And you can always run another round of feedback loop and get a better result. And there are lots and lots of domains where we're going to want to use these technologies, and we're going to, we're basically going to be able to push up the quality of the output as high as we're willing to go, and it's going to come down to figuring out how much do we want to spend here. And so it'll be kind of flipping that model around a little bit, which is an interesting thing we've started to think about.
Yeah. So Manan, I invite you to share as well.
I mean, like Pravir said, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of pressure with Gen AI adoption, right? And Gen AI, and more broadly AI, is different from traditional computing in terms of the cost and the rare resources and the rare and costly resources that are under the hood that are being used, right? So like Pravir said, cost visibility is extremely important from day one for customers. And associating cost with the value metric is super important, because in the absence of that, you will end up being like penny wise and pound foolish. So it's very important to attribute the cost with the value metric that is associated with the value that you get from Gen AI.
I want to throw another thing in there as well, which is one of the things we found with some of our customers with Gen AI is, number one, GPUs are expensive. And so this was an airline, and what they were actually doing is because they had paid for the GPUs, they literally broke their team into 3 shifts to work 8-hour shifts because they wanted to maximize the full 24 hours out of those GPUs because they're spending a lot of money on those every month. And they're now exploring, many of us now have PaaS offerings for GPUs as well, serverless GPUs. And so by the airline moving to a serverless GPU model, they were only paying as they used, and they could actually do all of it in the regular day 8-hour shift versus doing this crazy artificial thing where they had split their teams into these weird things. But so you're going to start seeing some of the same benefits we've done on compute in all of our clouds coming to GPUs as well, which is a very FinOps kind of topic as well.
All right, thank you, thank you. And so, James, we're gonna turn to you because we've discussed some perspectives on ways to make focus data relatable and actionable and relevant to engineers. And so if our goal, and we may get spicy here as well, but if our goal is to expand the use of focus data and bring it closer to where engineers work, so not just cost data, but bringing it closer to the engineers' work, what else do we need to consider?
Yeah, so it's super interesting. Like increasingly we're thinking about how do we help engineering teams make good decisions in the moment. And I think this will connect back to some of the other topics that we've talked about this morning as well. Maybe the first thing to say is I don't know that it's super helpful to put raw focus data in all of its glory in front of an engineering team. It's usually not obvious what they do with that. It's also maybe counterproductive to things like feed. One of the kind of emerging patterns that we've seen across many of our customers, we do this ourselves, is we actually, we define our own rate cards and we publish those internally to teams. And that helps with a couple of things. One is it hides away, commitment-based discounting constructs that, the team may have no control over. And so holding them accountable to something that, they're not part of a negotiation, it doesn't affect them, or they have less control over it, doesn't always make sense. But the other thing it lets us do, and I've seen our customers doing this as well, is we put our thumb on the scale. If we think that it's important over the next couple of years to shift from one technology to another, we may increase the price of the technology we want to discourage and essentially, lower the price, put a discount on the technology that we're trying to shift to. So, we'll kind of take our overarching strategy and sort of percolate that out into the teams, through something like a rate card. So that is immediately something that you want to think about in the context of something like Focus. Data format like that is supremely valuable. The granularity, the richness, we hear time and time again that customers love that. But you want to give them a way to bring in something like that custom rate card. And so the way that I think about Focus is a substrate that we're going to build on top of. And it's something, again, that I see across our customers. And again, we do this ourselves, where that'll be the foundational data set. We'll build tools. On top of that, that will extract the relevant information, help teams interpret the data, identify insights. A lot of the products that we offer externally present optimization insights, purchase insights. Those are all built off the same data set that we're making available there. And we found that to be a kind of recurring pattern. And I'm always on the lookout for patterns because we're all involved in this big kind of state space exploration. There was a comment in one of the presentations earlier about how interesting it is that everybody does things slightly differently. And that is a theme we've seen again and again over the years. But kind of when you step back and watch, there are definitely patterns that emerge. There are things where the common collective has landed on, this is a good way to do things, it works really well. And effective rate cards seems to be one of those, as an example. And so, we're always on the lookout for those common patterns so that we can think about how do we support that kind of pattern, how do we make it available to more customers so that not everybody has to sort of stumble onto it on their own.
And I think what we are really looking for is just the continued commitment, right, to the focus standard, because it's such an important step to democratizing cost awareness and really bringing FinOps to, you know, where everyone works and having everyone able to access the same data on a timely basis. I'm wondering, Pravir, do you have some perspectives on this as well?
Yeah, I'll add and echo a little bit of what James was saying, which is data is necessary but not sufficient. Ultimately, you don't want just the data, you want insights from that data. You want to be able to use that to answer the questions that you have, right? Getting a whole data dump doesn't serve that purpose, but it's the layer above that. I think he put it correctly in terms of it's the focus and the data set provides the substrate, but then it's really the insights and the questions on top of that. Having said that, you do want the data to be in the right format so that you can reason about it. I think a lot of the talks earlier talked about how we need to expand that standardization from not just cloud providers, but for SaaS, for on-prem, all of this, because you have to reason about that data across all of that, because a lot of the companies are present, not just multi-cloud, but have lots of other SaaS providers.
I was going to say, I also love with the agentic world we're in now, it used to be that you had to have an expert of data people in your organization. And now I find that much of my team can actually go answer the questions they want themselves because they don't have to learn how to write the crazy queries on the data anymore. You can ask the AI to do that work on your behalf. And so it is democratized data that more of my team can actually go and get the insights they want themselves versus having to have a team of experts go do that work for them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I was taking a look at the 1.2 standard, and I saw metadata there, which is very interesting, which is the invoice ID, right? And that's very interesting because cost data is dynamic, whereas invoice is kind of static. It's very important for invoice ID to be associated with cost data, and it allows for customers to reconcile their invoice with the dynamically changing cost, right? Because cost can evolve over time for even from the past, but the invoice is fixed in time. So this data, this metadata kind of standardizes across the board how data is interpreted and loses leaves ambiguity out of the picture. So it's very important to adopt this standard.
Okay, all right. So we're going to shift back to automation and in terms of optimization and how to bridge the trust gap, because optimization recommendations from U.S. providers tend to be safe on the face of it, right? But engineers may be skeptical for a variety of reasons, right? So generic recommendations don't really cut it, and once you get a false positive, trust is eroded. So I'm going to start with James. I'm curious on your perspectives here.
There's this kind of interesting tension that we face all the time when we think about what are the recommendations that we're going to surface. And there's definitely a dynamic that pushes us towards being more conservative. And a big part of that is, we're a big platform. With great power comes great responsibility. When we put recommendations out, we know that a lot of our customers will trust us. And we'll dive on those recommendations. And we want to make sure that recommendations never put you in a compromised position, never compromise availability, performance, durability, whatever those kind of key must-haves are, that underpin your business. But that does naturally push us towards more conservative recommendations. And it's like an internal struggle all the time. The other interesting thing is, everybody's business is slightly different. And so the things that make sense or are more or less actionable in a given business are going to be, very different. There'll be kind of common cores, and so one of the things that we hear from our customers all the time is, help us, filter out the things that may not be relevant to us. We spend a lot of time thinking about how do we get the feedback loop in so that we know that the recommendations that we're providing are meaningful, are actionable, are being acted on, and then increasingly. You want to think about how you go from that to to autopilot, to applying those automatically. And, we look at this for our own teams. We run our own big business. We spend a lot of money. We see lots of opportunities. We use a lot of these tools ourselves internally. And we see that same diversity there.
And Scott?
Yeah, I love what you said, James. That's perfect. I was going to say one of the things that same exact issue. Every customer is different. They want to optimize in different ways based on the way their business works and the loads that their applications take. One of the things we're looking at now is, as I mentioned earlier a little bit, we have some agentic work that can actually look at your sites or your applications and provide some insights. But some of the feedback we've got from our customers is they don't just want to have like James's and Mai's recommendations, which, as you said, we're going to be conservative by default because we want to protect the customer. They want to be able to put their own recommendations in. And so we're going to enable the customer to actually optimize our site reliability agents by putting their own rules in versus just having my rules. Because one customer might want to put a way more aggressive rule in than we would do. And I think it really is it's a case-by-case basis. And so I think we just have to find ways to offer that capability to the customer.
Yeah. Vera?
What I'll add to this is, I think you touched upon the topic of trust. So when I think about trust, it's really around 3 key pillars. First, it's about transparency, then control, and then auditability, right? What I mean by transparency is, let's make sure your granular cost data is visible across all the services, and it's transparent whether you want to look at it at a project level, at an org level, whatever slicing dimensions you want to look at, right? You have transparency into all the data that's there, right? When you think about control, it touches upon, I think, both James and Scott were saying, right? Every customer's business is different. They want to have the control to tweak what their risk threshold is, what is the thing they want to optimize for, right? So having that control to the customer gives them the trust. And then finally, auditability in terms of the recommendations that are even given out. Because if someone dismisses a recommendation, now you look at it on the console 1 week later, and you're like, wait, I saw that recommendation. Where did it go? Why don't I see it, right? Having an auditability of, no, somebody in your organization actually canceled that recommendation because they didn't want it. Those are the things that build trust. Lack of those erode trust, right? So those are 3 pillars that we want to look at.
Agree.
Yeah, recommendations are multidimensional, multifaceted. And the recommendations that we provide to our customers and customers expect from us are across many facets, right? They don't just want cost recommendations. They want performance, availability, security recommendations. They want recommendations about being carbon neutral, right? So in the context of all of these things, customers are able to make better decisions about how they want to optimize their footprint, their journey into the cloud, while taking all of these dimensions in context.
Awesome, yeah. And I mean, what we're seeing, obviously, is that automation and recommendations have to have context awareness. So I think all 4 of you touched on that. So I'm really appreciative.
And maybe to tie it back briefly to the Gen AI topic is, I think increasingly, across all spheres of our business, we're thinking about how do we make sure we're making the right information available for agents. And I'm going to use agents to mean literal kind of, forward-looking sci-fi, self-autonomous, agents, but even just, people using some of these tools, making sure that we're presenting the right information, and in the case of recommendations, like rich enough information, so that they can make good decisions and go and figure out, okay, what do I do with that? And it turns out that's just useful for people as well, and so it just makes it better for both.
Yep. Okay. So we have time for a bonus question around Cloud Plus scopes. And it's an exciting development. There's a lot of lively discussion in the community. So organizations operating in hybrid environments rightfully expect unified visibility and accountability across their full tech footprint. So I'm just wondering, how will you support your customers that are aspiring to incorporate these FinOps practices beyond public cloud?
I mean, I can go first.
I'll give you a hint. Focus. Go ahead.
I think I'd be echoing a little bit of what you all heard earlier, which is companies are not just using public clouds, but also using a lot of the SaaS companies. Yep. And when you think about what's the overall cost and how do you optimize that cost and how do you talk to your stakeholders within the company, right? You have to present the overall cost allocation because ultimately customers are looking to run a streamlined footprint in cloud. They want to innovate with new technology and not burn the bank. And they want predictability, right? For all three things, you can't just have a narrower focus or narrower scope. I won't overload the word focus, narrower scope.
Yep.
So you want to look at a broader scope of what is your overall footprint. And so again, public cloud, SaaS, on-prem, all of those have to be standardized. And instead of the customers then trying to align and join at the right dimensionality, having the right output in the right standardized schema allows them to not do that heavy lifting on their side, but take that so that they can provide the holistic view within their organization.
Yeah, I think one of the most underappreciated aspects of focus is the amount of undifferentiated heavy lifting it eliminates. The cloud providers, like we live and breathe this stuff. We spent a long time thinking about how to make this information available. That's not necessarily true across every SaaS provider. It's not true for your teams that are managing on-prem solutions. And focus takes away the heavy work of having to sit down and think about, okay, how do I even represent this data? What makes sense? You just have something that you can build on. And so I think that's a piece of it that's sometimes missed.
All right. Well, we are out of time. So what we'll take away together is that as FinOps practices mature and evolve, the goal is a virtuous cycle between where executive strategy guides investment and FinOps insights feed back to shape that strategy with real-time ground-level data. And we look to you, our service providers, as our partners to close that loop, to turn cost data into a continuous feedback engine for both execution and strategic planning. I thank you for a wonderful discussion, and I encourage the community to keep this conversation going because that's why we're here. Thank you so much and have a wonderful FinOps X 2025.
All right, we're nearly at the end. I wanted to say a thank you very much again to our sponsors. The break is right below us in the expo hall. There's food, there's coffee, there's bathrooms. Head down there. Also, a thank you to our governing board members who help us drive our strategy at the foundation. And last thing I'm going to leave you with, well, two things. On the back of your badge is a LinkedIn code that you can scan. You can scan mine if you want to meet your friends and connect later. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for FinOps for AI and AI for FinOps. Head downstairs to see you in a bit. Thanks so much.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. For more FinOps X 2025 content, go check out our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and leave comments and questions for all of our wonderful speakers. We appreciate your support.